Hello everyone, I'm Steve Wiss and I'm joined by Jonathan Verdugber, and this is the Nordic Football Podcast. We're back to talk about all things Norway and Sweden. So Jonathan, my old friend, how's life treating you?
Good day to you, Steve. Good day to listeners. Life's treating me well. And I'm happy to be back on the show because we've got plenty to talk about, haven't we? And not just domestic leagues, but Europe as well.
Yes, plenty on our plate to talk about here in this particular episode. We are going to start in Sweden, where there's been plenty of matches on recently. And, I was just thinking about this, looking at the table today. It looks like there's a real title race on our hands right now, where a bunch of teams are there at the top of the table. And it's all come about thanks to a little bit of a Malmö wobble. John. So, how do you see things at the top of the Allsvenskan right now?
Yeah, you're bang on there, Steve. They've drawn 3 games in a row in the league, and that has indeed created a few ripples in the title race. A 0-0 draw with Östersunds this past weekend. A big surprise in their failure to beat Sirius. In the week before that, which I was really quite shocked about, to be honest, failing to beat them at home, and an away draw as well against Djurgården. So couple that up with a draw against AIK 2 weeks prior to that, and there's a few points dropped there for Malmö, the title favourites, and that has really allowed 3 or 4 teams to get right back into this title race. We've got Oyikor, who have, they're the champions, and they've somehow dug themselves back into this race. Now they're level on points after some good results of recent form. And the one I think that we probably should talk about at some point is Djurgården have just come out from nowhere, and they've got a game in hand. And if they were to win that game in hand, they're top of the league with 38 points compared to Malmö and AIK on 37. And the other one that I'm sure we're going to talk about at some point is Hammarby. They are flying, and yeah, we'll talk to them about them soon.
Yeah, it's all very bunched up at the top. Malmö and AIK on 37 points each. Djurgården 35 with a game in hand. Hammarby 31, and then you got Häcken and IFK Göteborg on 30 each, but they've also got a game in hand. So I'm not sure who these games in hands are against, but you could get a situation where you got 6 teams within 4 points of each other at the top, which is pretty damn crazy, but very exciting, I must say, in terms of this. So let's talk about AIK because they've really put the pressure on recently. Saw a few tweets recently saying they've actually fielded weakened sides in the Allsvenskan because of the Champions League qualifiers involvement, and it was a bit of a risk for them. But it doesn't seem to have done them any harm. They've come through comfortably. 2-0 wins against Helsingborg and Sirius. So has actually this run of extra games in Europe helped them gain some rhythm, do you think?
I think it's helped them in some ways. It's maybe sharpened their minds a bit in some way. I think there's been a few transfers as well involving AIK. For example, Daniel Sundgren, which was a very high-profile departure. A lot of rancor there. People not happy about that whole situation, which we'll maybe touch on in a minute. But yeah, they've picked up some good form of late, both in Europe as well, where they managed to come through their opening qualifier, and then in the league with some good results. Obviously beating Sirius 2-0, they did the job where Malmö failed, beating them away 2-0. Beat Helsingborg. They've had a fairly comfortable run as well of late, which I think has helped them. Kalmar, Elfsborg, Helsingborg, Sirius. You couldn't ask for 4 better games. And the next 2 games are against ASE Eskilstuna, the worst team in the league, and then Kalmar again at home. So a very nice little run of results following the 0-0 draw with Malmö back in June, which would have probably cut them right adrift if they'd lost that one. So this nice little cushion of fixtures has just helped them get back into the race, really.
As soon as I started ditching my AIK defenders on the fantasy Allsvenskan, they started winning matches to 0, which is rather typical, isn't it? But yeah, they're in a decent rhythm right now, and Djurgården, like you say, they're sneaking up on everyone really, bit by bit. A nice little unbeaten run. I mean, their defense is their defense a bit underrated? Do you think, Djurgården?
Well, I think the whole team's underrated, and I think nobody has underrated them more than probably myself. I'll be honest. They've just gone a little bit under the radar, but they're doing fantastically well. It really has to be said. And yeah, they're pulling out of the bag again with some good form. Obviously, they've drawn some games, but they've beaten Häcken obviously in this most recent round of fixtures. A 2-0 solid result against a big competitor up there at the top of the table. Häcken a little bit weakened obviously, and they played on Thursday in the Europa League, which probably sapped some life out of them, I think. But Djurgården once again, just a solid team, doing very well. There's a lot of players that are coming to form. Jesper Karlström is one, for example, who I think has been quite impressive. And yeah, they're just pushing along nicely.
Do you see this as a just a 3-horse race, John, or do you think someone like Hammarby or Häcken or even IFK Göteborg could get into this title race as well?
Häcken, I don't think will get into the title race. I think they're slightly too weak, and they've lost a couple of players as well in the recent rounds. Nasiru Mohammed has departed for Bulgaria, and I think Marvin Selic as well has left. I think that EFK, with the departure of Benjamin Nygren, Carl Starfelt as well, they've lost a couple of players there that I think might affect them. So I think a massive factor will be who can keep their players. But ultimately, I would probably look at it as a four-team title race, really. I think Hammarby, you cannot underestimate them with 40 goals scored. Although it's a 6-point gap, if they win their game in hand, that's 3 points. So I would not rule them out by any means. Djurgården, you have to start taking them very seriously now. AIK with the best defensive record in the league, as always. And Malmö, who are the top of the league and the favourites. So yeah, I look at those 4 teams as the key players in this title race.
Yeah, Hammarby are scoring goals for fun at the moment, and as you say, 40 on the board already. Defensive record not as strong, but I mean, how long can this offense keep firing, John? I mean, I know they've got some players that are linked with moves away from the club. How important is it that they finally actually managed to keep a consistent team? You mentioned in the preseason podcast, they're always losing players. This is the one time they just need to, get everyone on the book still.
Well, they just can't stop scoring at the moment. Unbelievable run of form. 6 goals against AFC Eskilstuna, 6-1 winners at this weekend, 5-2 winners against Elfsborg, 3-2 away at GIF Sundsvall the week before that, 6-2 against Falkenberg. You total that up, that's 20 goals in 4 games, which is unbelievable, really. Especially when you consider that they've scored 40 goals in the whole season. So they've done that. They've hit half that tally in 4 games. So yeah, they're really looking good. Players like Katka Nicolic, Muja Matankovic, who I wrote about recently in the Y Scout blog, as one is rumored to be maybe leaving, but he's been fantastic of late. Imad Khalili, Nikola Jurjic. You just look around their team and it's packed full of goals. And although their defenses are always a worry, if you look at it, they've conceded more than double Malmö, AIK, and Djurgården in terms of goals conceded, and way more than even the likes of Häcken, IFK Göteborg, even Norrköping. You can even push further down the table. They've conceded way more goals than Kalmar, who were in the relegation playoffs. But it's that ability to score goals for fun that is really pushing Hammarby, and it's an exciting time, especially for their fans, really watching such entertaining football.
Well, you know what? Goals win football matches, don't they, John? It's an old cliche, but they do win matches, and they're full of goals right now, Hammarby. So a really exciting title race. I'm going to ask you, who's going to win the Allsvenskan?
Well, my preseason prediction was Norrköping, and that's out of the water, so that's not happening. I think at this moment in time, it'd be hard to look over Malmö. I think the European qualifiers have maybe pushed them a little bit. They've wobbled slightly, and I think that might be a bit of a distraction for them as well, as we always talk about. They've played Domzali in the qualifier on Thursday, come out with the draw, but that's knocked them a little bit, I think, and that will be a very big factor. But I think with Malmö, their ability to keep players is generally a big plus for them. Whereas if you look at Djurgården, for example, Jesper Karlström is heavily linked with moves abroad. Hammarby, you've got Tankovic is linked with moves abroad. Djurgården obviously always tend to lose players at times. and the other one, AIK as well. They've had a lot of upheaval. Daniel Sundgren leaving, as I mentioned, a key player in their title race before, and there's others who have been, rumored to be leaving. So I think that just gives Malmö the edge for me at this moment in time.
Okay, Malmö is the prediction from Jonathan for Doug to win the Allsvenskan at this stage. Now, let's move on to a bit of transfer talk. And now, for those who don't know, we have an association with Y-Scout this year, in association with the Just Football as well, with this topic. And we have been doing an article on the Y-Scout blog each month. The most recent one was released 10 days ago. 5 possible transfers in the Swedish Allsvenskan. Give it a read if you've not already had a look at that article on the Y-Scout blog. But some very interesting players to talk about in this article. One of them is Muammer Tankovic from Hammarby. And he's been having a hell of a season. And, well, there's a lot of clubs sniffing around for his services, isn't there, John?
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to talk about Tankovic and maybe one or two other names on the list. Obviously, you can check it out on Y-Scout and follow them if you don't already. And don't forget to follow us as well at Nordic Footpod, as we'll tweet out the latest blogs whenever we do them. Another one coming from Steve soon, which will be very interesting, I'm sure. Tankovic has already more than matched his tally for last season, where he hit 7 goals and 4 assists. He's now really smashed that, to be honest. At the time of writing, he had 6 goals and 4 assists, but he's now improved on that as well with the recent form. And just to mention that, Columbus Crew came in for him in MLS. I know you're a fan of American football out there, Steve, and they were trying to sign him, but it didn't quite go through, which is good news for Hammarby. And with the transfer window still open, who knows what's going to happen? But that's one to look out for, because if he was to leave, it would be a significant blow for them. He's really, really doing well.
Have there been any transfers that have already taken place that have been catching your eye, or has there been fairly unremarkable business so far?
Well, there has been a very major piece of news in the league, which is the departure of the league's top goal scorer, Jordan Larsson, who has he was actually in my piece. I named him as one of the players who could leave, and it's been done, pretty much more or less done and dusted. He is off to CSKA Moscow in Russia. Fee rumored to be roughly around 4 million euros. So a very good, bit of business there for Norrköping for the 22-year-old who's not been there that long, really, since coming back from NEC Nijmegen in Holland. But that's the way of Sweden, isn't it, really, at the moment? It just seems like any player who gets on any sort of run of form, they're plucked out of the league almost instantly. Larsson, one thing to say about him, obviously, is departing. I think he's really, I think there were a lot of question marks about him when he returned to Sweden. I think people kind of cast him off as a bit of a failure in Holland. There was talks that he wasn't happy about his position out there. He wanted to play as a central striker, and maybe they wanted him to play more out wide. And when you come back from a big move, obviously he was a bit ridiculed. And obviously he was previously at Helsingborg, where they were relegated with him in the team. So he's really kind of proven himself in Sweden in this last sort of 6 months, I think, and he'll be happy to sort of get that monkey off his back, really, in terms of the doubters proving them wrong. 11 goals, really good form. Some of his finishing was exceptional, to be honest. One-touch finishes on his left foot. I was very impressed with his form. I wasn't sure about how he'd do. I think in the preseason show I said that he'll be hit or miss this season, and I named him as someone who could be a key player for them. And he's really done well. So he leads the league with 11 goals, but I'm not sure if he'll be back as well, to be honest, because he looks like he's earned that move now, and at 22 he can push on maybe and carry on his career in Russia.
So you think he's going to, be a success over in Russia, or will he flop again?
Well, I think it's a curious move. I don't necessarily think it's the best move for him, really. Who am I to judge? I'm not saying I'm the authority on that, but I think it's a slightly strange move. I would have liked to have seen him see out the whole season. I'm never really massively in favour of players moving very quickly, and I don't think he's, I'd like to see him complete the season, maybe finish league top goal scorer. I don't know too much about CSK in terms of what they need, but obviously they're a massive club in Russia, and a very good infrastructure there, a good platform for him to go on European football. So, in terms of if it's a good move, it's obviously a bigger club than NEC Nijmegen. I wonder if he'll get as much game time maybe But maybe he will. Good box player. He's very, a fox in the box type, and I think he can thrive. I certainly think he can adapt to the Russian Premier League and maybe get goals. But you just wonder if this is the right time, or maybe give it 6 more months. But good luck to him, and I think it's all round. I think it is a good move, to be honest. And Norrköping get a good bit of cash there to maybe reinvest in their squad, which they'll need to.
It is very much a league where players depart, and another one we're going to talk about is the Nasiru Mohammed, who I believe has left Häcken now to Levski Sofia, of all teams. I mean, that's got to be a worry, isn't it, when you're losing players to the Bulgarian league?
Not a fan of Bulgaria, Steve.
Well, it's not I'm not saying it's a tin pot league or anything like that.
I take your point. Yeah, it's not the biggest league, is it?
No, it's.
But I think Nasir Mohammed, to be fair, he's kind of gone off the boil slightly in Häcken, and maybe it was time for him to move on. He didn't make that many appearances this season for the club, and I'll always have fond memories of him because he was a player that when I was living in Sweden, he was very prominent for Häcken. He was one of their star men, to be honest, along with Crespo, Kamara. He's played 203 games for Häcken. 42 goals, 33 appearances, and he's only 25. So he's had a very, very good career there. Obviously, part of the cup-winning squad as well. And I think at the start of the season, I put him in my fantasy team, expecting him to do big things, really. But it just hasn't quite worked out. He seems to have maybe not been trusted by the new manager. Well, not new now, but he's been there every year. But just gradually sort of fallen down the pecking order, I think. And yeah, only 12 appearances, which was, I expected more, really. And he didn't, there was a spell of games where he was on the bench. He was sort of in and out of the team, benched, that kind of thing, taken off early. Didn't really contribute a huge amount in terms of one goal, one assist in this season's campaign. So I think they've taken the chance there to just sort of maybe get him out of the squad and maybe rejuvenate. But yeah, I'll miss Nasiru Mohammed because he was a very nice character around the squad, very smiley, seemed to be a very popular member of the dressing room. So yeah, it's just a little bit of nostalgia there as well, I think. But I don't know how he'll adapt in Bulgaria. I'm not sure how Bulgaria compares to Scandinavian football, to be honest, if it's better or same level or worse.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure either, but I don't think it's particularly a great level. But perhaps, it was. I was reading here. He says it's time for a new challenge. He said in a statement, "I want to use this opportunity to say a very big thank you to BK Häcken for a wonderful and memorable 7.5 years. I thank the former club chairman Dennis Andersson, current chairman Marcus, and sports director Sonny Carlson, who you once interviewed on the Nordic Football Podcast, John." So I think it's probably a time for him to move on. Best of luck to him there. So
yeah, and it's interesting that you don't often get players who played 200 games in Allsvenskan, do you? Or in Sweden in one club. I mean, if you look at Benjamin Nygren, he barely played more than 15. So that's a good old innings, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, how many games did Martin Odegaard play in Norway? I mean,
yeah.
You know what I mean.
So 200, really, he's done his time, hasn't he?
Yeah, he certainly has done his time. So, let's just talk a bit about the transfer rumours regarding Östersunds. At the moment, they're the best of the rest. 8th place, 20 points on the board. Good point against Malmö today, and just lost one of the last 6 games. But there's always plenty of rumours surrounding this club with transfers, isn't there, John? And no different at the moment.
Well, they've made a big signing in Blair Turgott, who I think we talked about briefly. He's come from non-league, in fact, in England, and he should be an interesting signing, a winger formerly of West Ham's academy. Yeah, they have got some players linked in and out. I think Curtis Edwards is a bit of a famous Graham Potter name. He's been there for many years. Rose through the ranks. He was recently... it was recently sort of said that he's announced he won't stay at the club. He's on an outgoing contract, and it looks like he will be leaving to join either Djurgården or Hammarby, in the coming days or weeks, which is interesting. And yeah, there's a couple of others. I mean, Ian Birchall's undergone a bit of a squad overhaul there in recent months, and there's been a lot of ins and outs, as you say.
What is your mid-season report on Ian Birchall this year?
I think, as I said in previous shows, a little bit inconsistent at times. I like what he's trying to do with the squad. I think they've got a lot of players of potential. I think it will be interesting to see how they adapt. The last game I watched of Östersunds was against Norrköping when they were absolutely battered. To be honest, I think there's no. I mean, even Ian Birchall said it in his press conference afterwards. They were overrun and outplayed completely. And a few players did tend to struggle in that match. To be honest, Norrköping just carved through them. They were really, really impressive, and they showed the sort of form to me that suggested, why I picked them to maybe challenge for the title, because on their day, Norrköping can be really, really ruthless, and they were in that game. Östersunds have had some games like that where they just haven't been quite on it, and they've been up and down, but they've also had games where they've been look very, very good. So, yeah, I think that is it. Did you say 8th place? I think that's about right for them. Mid-table is probably where they deserve to be on the basis of this season. I think one interesting thing there, Steve, that you mentioned in terms of the league table is there is quite a big gap appearing, isn't there, between the top 7 and the rest?
Yeah,
from Norrköping to Östersunds is 8 points. I know Östersunds have a game in hand there, but if you actually take Norrköping out of the equation, the gap from Östersunds to BK Häcken in 6th place is 10 points. So and 17 goal swing as well in goal difference. So yeah, there's a little bit of a 2-tier league at the moment, isn't there? Really.
I definitely noticed that very much so. It seems like the top 7 are quite a bit above the rest this season. So, I mean, I guess 8th place wouldn't be a bad finish for Östersunds, would it? They've been accumulating points. I'll say that. Only one win in 11 games though for Östersunds, which is perhaps a little bit of a concern. I don't know.
I think they lack a good goal. I think they lack a top goal scorer. I think they've really missed Sam Angolas leaving. He was just an all-round brilliant player for the league. I think they haven't quite managed to replace his goals and assists. Dino Azamovic has been quite good, and he was in the blog I wrote, maybe being linked to moves to the Championship, but he's only hit 5 goals really, which is a decent tally for him, but it's not enough for a team really. If that's your top goal scorer, you need players contributing a little bit more than that, or you need 4 or 5 players scoring 5 goals, don't you? Not just one.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a problem for them really.
So a couple of other players that you wanted to talk about regarding rumours, Roman Gall and Jesper Karlström, who are they linked with?
Yes, and we've got a very prominent follower on Twitter who tends to follow American players in the Scandinavian leagues, and we've talked about Roman Gall a couple of times, and I think he was a player I mentioned in pre-season that he could have a very good season, but it's not happened for him at all under Uwe Rosler. They seem to have just fallen out completely, really. And Gall has come out and said that he'd be open to a transfer now. He said, I think the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, was the Ballymena games. He didn't appear much at all in those Europa League ties where Malmö absolutely destroyed Ballymena, to be fair. And Romain Gall came out after that and said, if I'm not going to be playing games, then it's time for me to leave this club. He said he wants to stay in Sweden, and he certainly, I think there's been rumours he might go to America, but he said he doesn't want to go to America at this stage. But he said if he doesn't play more games, he may have to consider his future, which is a shame because I think last season he showed glimpses that he could really be a breakout player in this league. But Uwe Rosler just doesn't seem to maybe fancy him for whatever reason. I'd like to see him loaned out maybe to another club in the league, or maybe signed by another club in the league. I think he's got a lot of potential there. But looks like he could maybe be one for the outgoing transfer. Quickly on Uwe Rosler as well. There's something I want to talk about that happened last week was the Sirius game. Did you see that, Steve? The press conference?
I did see that. I mean, I must say I was surprised to see both managers in the press conference together. I mean, who on earth thought of that idea?
Yeah, it happens all the time, yeah.
I never realised it actually occurred. Whether it's a good or a bad idea, I don't know, but it just seems a very weird idea to me. But it seemed like he was kind of antagonising the Sirius manager a bit.
Yeah, indeed, and it was in a very interesting situation where the Sirius managers took a bit of an umbrage with Uwe Rosler saying, he came across as a bit patronising, didn't he? And he said, "Well done for getting a point at Malmö," which was taken a bit the wrong way by the manager, who came out and said, "Well, no, I want 3 points," and just got a little bit touchy, didn't it, between the two of them? And he said, "I wanted 3 points," and then Uwe Rosler replied, "I don't think you deserve 3 points from that game," and then he said, "I don't think you should be commenting on I don't think you should be talking to us as if we, don't deserve, 1 point. And it just got very tasty. It didn't look like at one point they might come to blows or something.
Yeah, I mean, quite American, wasn't it? I mean, you get this in like American sports, in sort of after game interviews. I mean, it was different. It was interesting, wasn't it? I mean, let's be honest. 80-90% of the post-match interviews in football are an absolute load of bullshit. And it's just the same old questions. Some of the questions asked are absolutely pathetic as well. I don't know what it's like in Sweden, but certainly over here in England, you've got that numpty from Sky Sports who, not Jeff Shreves, but he just winds people up. But the other guy, I forget what he's called. And it's just, questions that are useless. And, it was actually, I quite like seeing something a bit different there, where the managers are interacting.
The serious manager definitely verbally gave as good as he got in that little tussle. But yeah, Uwe Rotter's come under a little bit of pressure of late, and the draw with Mal Ostersons as well. He praised Osterson's goalkeeper Ali Kaita and said he's had the best game he'll ever have, the game of his life, and he's just showing maybe a few signs of maybe arrogance, or some people might call it arrogance, some people might call it signs of strain. Just not been too happy with some of his results, I guess, at late, and looks like maybe it's getting to him a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit of pressure there for Uwe Rosler, and there's a bit of pressure down the bottom of the table for certain teams right now. It's interesting we talk about Malmö because they've only lost one match all season. Can you remember who that was against?
GIF Sundsvall.
GIF Sundsvall. Now, back then, obviously, GIF were flying high because they'd also drawn against Djurgården. But since then, they've only won one match. But last time they actually got 3 points was the 29th of April against Falkenberg. And it's been a horrible run since. Just counting up now. Loads of defeats. 9 defeats in their last 12 games for GIF Sundsvall. And now it's caught up with them. They're in the bottom 3 after a recent defeat to Falkenberg. What's going on at Sundsvall, John? I know you've been worried about them for quite some time. And is this the year they go down?
Well, this 2019 season has been a tale of woe for GIF Sundsvall of late, and we praised them last season for their entertaining football. They've been a joy to watch in the last season, but it's really hit the rocks in 2019, as we've said. Like you mentioned, yeah, they beat Malmö, and they looked very good at that point. Linus Hellenius was scoring goals. You had Batanero in the central midfield pulling strings, a player who's completed more passes than any player in the league, by the way, by some distance. You had the defense looking quite mean at times. Jonathan Tamimi was looking good, but he's a sort of symbol, I think, of their season. Really, he's been quite poor, and the team in general has just been quite poor. Steve Escalainen as well, the goalkeeper, has since left, been transferred out of the league. A lot of their best players have left, and even their best coaches have left. One of them joining EFK Göteborg, who brought in this sort of Spanish influence of tiki-taka style football that they've been playing for the last year or so. And it's just not happened for them. They seem to struggle more and more of late. And I really do worry for them, actually, Steve, that they've been defeated in their most recent game. And that is a massive blow. I think they lost 2-0 at Falkenberg, which really, that is a game they should not be losing. It's 6 points almost in terms of relegation. And that's put them 3 points clear. Falkenberg are 3 points clear now of GIF Sundsvall with a game in hand. So, yeah, you definitely have to worry about them.
And another team that you maybe have to worry about is Kalmar, who we always joke they're in 11th place in this league. Well, they're not anymore. They're down in 14th. They've lost 4 straight. They can't score a goal for love nor money, can they? Shocking goal-scoring record down there towards the bottom of the table. But, I mean, I say Sundsvall and Kalmar are a concerning sort of duo right now. But, I mean, in terms of Sundsvall, was this expected of them this year? What really is the core of the problem there?
Well, they concede goals for fun at the moment. 28 conceded. That's one of the worst tallies, in the league. Really, not great. And they do score goals. I mean, obviously 18 isn't amazing. It's 1 per game on average, but it's not fantastic, is it? I mean, it's all right for down the bottom of the table, but it's not all right for where they want to be, which is probably mid-table. I think they're really struggling at both ends of the field, really. I think their style of play just isn't quite coming off as it was before. I think they lack maybe a focal point. They've brought a couple of new Spaniards into the team. One of them called Paul Roig, who's I think he was formerly at Real Mallorca, I believe. He was at a couple of big clubs in Spain at one point. He should add some tenacity to their front line. But yeah, it's other thing to bear in mind, they've actually played 18 games this season. So although a lot of the teams down the bottom, for example, Kalmar have played 16 and they're 2 points ahead. So I'm not saying Kalmar will win both games, but they've got a chance there to pull well clear of GIF Sundsvall. Falkenberg have got a game in hand. A win there would put them 6 points clear of them. Helsingborg game in hand, Örebro game in hand, AFC Eskilstuna game in hand, and the level on points. So if all those teams even got a point or two in their next couple of games, in their games in hand, GIF Sundsvall will be rock bottom of the league. So it's worrying times for Joel Cedergren, and in fact, the board have come out and said that, the dreaded vote of confidence. So, it's worrying times for them. I think they've had financial troubles, but of late, the sale of Hellenius has allowed them to buy a few, and I think that's given them some room for manoeuvre. But they need to be very good in the transfer window, I think, to pick up some players in the squad that can maybe just carry them through for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the table, I mean, I am very concerned about these three at the bottom right now. Kalmar, we know there's quite a few fans that follow us on this podcast. What is the problem there? Tweet into us what the issues are. What is the actual solution as well for Kalmar fans? AFC Eskilstuna, there. It feels like every time they're in this league, they're rock bottom, John. I mean, the last time, of course, they had Michael Jolly in charge, and the situation's just as vile right now, isn't it, compared to a couple of years ago? So, I mean, which two teams are going to get relegated, John, automatically, do you think?
Well, it's tough to say, but, there's one thing about AFC Eskilstuna. They've been beastly form of late, to be honest. They don't look good at all to me. I think I thought they would stay up in the preseason show. I thought they showed a lot of good signs in the Svenska Cupen. They look quite good in the cup, obviously getting to the final and seeing off AIK. But they've been really, really poor. Ghastly, in fact, 14 goals scored, 32 conceded. They don't seem to be able to sort of put together any kind of form for love nor money. What I don't like about AFC Eskilstuna is I think their recruitment stinks. I think they just buy random. They look to me like a club who is completely agent driven. It looks to me like, maybe 2 or 3 random agents from different countries send them their dead wood and they buy them. If you go through their squad list, it's just complete journeyman. I can't see what they're doing with the squad. I mean, Dennis Kozik is a good loan signing from Djurgården. Nemanja has been a good player. I think he's struggled though, but he's shown some glimpses. They've got some loan players who are good as well. Adi Nalic, for example, who's done well in fantasy football, but just a lot of their players just seem to be so random to me, Steve. Just completely random. Sandro Zvejbar, they've just bought now from the Russian second division, I believe. Who is he? Who knows? He played some youth games for Russia, but there's just a lot of random players. I don't get, are they scouting these players, or it screams to me, just recommendations. The manager Nemanja Miljanovic just hasn't seemed to be able to put together a run. I wonder who's doing their recruitment. Obviously, battered 6-1 at the weekend. Just not nice. I really fear for them. They need to sort of gel some sort of squad. And another big blow for them was the loss of their key centre back Felix Michel, who's gone to AIK. And he was one of the few players who actually was quite good for them. So yeah, worrying times for AFC Eskilstuna, which will probably please most of Sweden, seeing as they're one of the most hated teams in the league.
All right, well, we're going to take a little bit of a break. After the interval, we're going to be talking about the European results involving Norwegian and Swedish clubs, and a little bit talk on Norwegian latest topics as well. So join us after the break for more.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast, episode number, I think, 11. We are going to talk now about Europe, which is a touchy subject for anyone who's of British persuasion, with just a few months left till we leave Europe. But in football terms, it's still going on, and the Scandinavian teams have many challenges ahead of them in the next few weeks. We've had the first qualifying rounds done, and there was a couple of teams failed to cross that hurdle, Koff, Bran, but many of them came through. And where are we at now, Steve? I mean, I want to start with what I thought was a massive result, really, which was Haugesund beating Sturm Graz of Austria. I saw the scenes in that game, Steve, and the fans were giving it some serious love in the stands. You know, there was real dancing around, and the players were dancing with the fans. It looked really, really, really good for Haugen. I've got a bit of a soft spot for them, so let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, this was a big shock. I mean, as you know, many of you do know, I'm a betting tipster. And I know a lot of professional gamblers out there. And I mean, I personally don't usually bet on European matches because I don't know enough about the opposition. But I did see a couple of well-renowned tipsters bet on Sturm Graz in this game. And the main reason is because Haugesund are missing players to injury, suspension, whatever you want to call it. They didn't field a particularly strong 11, but they fully deserved this 2-0 win against Sturm Graz. A big shock. And I mean, 2-0 win at home is massive in Europe, isn't it? No away goal conceded. I mean, I was really surprised that this happened, but they just delivered an unbelievable performance. And, you know, fair play to them. I just hope they get the business done in the second leg now, really. You know, 1 goal and Sturm Graz are going to have to score 4 times.
How likely do you think it is that they will be able to go to Austria and maybe get a positive result? Or is it, you know, I don't know what the odds were, for example, for the first leg, but, you know, how likely do you think it is that they can complete the job?
Every chance. I mean, it wasn't like Sturm Graz were massively odds on or anything like that. I just think the expectation was that they would have enough strength in this first leg against the Haugesund 11 that were fielded. The Austrians looked undercooked. I mean, their season has only just started. I think they've had the first round. You know, they're going to have to improve on that first leg performance. I mean, the big concern is if Haugesund can get themselves an away goal, like I said, then Sturm Graz are going to have to score 4 times. And that's the key. I mean, Haugesund, if they score, they're going to go through, in my opinion. But if they don't, then it leaves the 2-0, 3-0 scoreline open, doesn't it? And that would be the big concern for me if they got steamrolled. So
there was a very interesting comment from their manager, Jostein Grindhaug, who said he's not going to allow the team to suck on the caramel for too long after one of the biggest nights in their history. Quite like that turn of phrase there. But yeah, he said, you know, we could lose 5-0 in Austria. Today's struggle means very little. We have slipped the lemon for almost a month, although I think that's probably a translation thing. But yeah, he said the way the team has battled has really impressed me. I'm very pleased with the performance, and travelling to Graz with a 2-0 win is the best we could have hoped for before this game. He's sent a bit of a message of caution there, you know, and he says that they're going to have to be very, very careful and could even lose 5-0. What are your thoughts on that, Steve? I mean, is that a motivational tool, or is that kind of a...
I'm just worried about, I mean, I'm really worried about their match at the weekend. I'm going to bet against them, whoever they got. I think it's Starbeck away. They're going to be battered and bruised just 3 days after a trip to Graz. I think they're going to have to forget about the Eliteserien for the next few weeks if they make it through to the next round. And they've just got to focus on this Europe and try and get players back fit. But it could be one of their magical runs, sort of unexpected runs that develop. You know, good words from the manager there, I think. You know, they've had a good win, but it means nothing if they don't go through to the next round, does it? And I don't know how much money it would be worth for them to make it the next qualifying round. But I'd imagine there'd be a few 100,000 euros involved there, John, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I read somewhere that Connors Key Nomads, for example, who beat Kilmarnock, I think I read that they have made 647,000 euros so far from just that one European qualifying win, all things considered. So qualifying to the next round will be worth even more to a club like Haugesund. Funnily enough, they're in exactly the same predicament as Ostersunds, 8th in the league with 20 points. So what are your thoughts on their season overall so far? And how's my boy Bruno Leite doing? Is he still there?
Yeah, he's doing all right there, and they've had injury problems. Still, their best player Alexander Sturlas is out for the season. They had the drugs incident with the doping test that went wrong for the striker Vaji, and but they're hanging in there. And Ibrahim Kone's come in and done a good job up front for them, scoring a few goals. I mean, they hammered Tromsø in that last Eliteserien game, I must say, and they could have had about 10 goals in that match. They're just in a really good phase, where, sometimes teams are just the real good attitude of next man steps up sort of thing, Forget about what's happening on paper. On the field itself, they're delivering the goods. And, I think everyone in Norway is wishing them well too. It's hard for fans to get behind Rosenborg and Molde in Europe, but I think.
Do you have any idea who they could get in the next round? Were they to progress?
Not actually looked at the draw for the next round, but it's obviously whoever it is, I'd imagine probably quite a decent side potentially. I think is the drawing been done for the next round yet? Yeah, it probably would have.
I think it has. There's either or, obviously, but I think it has. Let's move on anyway. I mean, obviously, the big story was Brann being eliminated, Stephen. We had SK Brann English, didn't we, on the show in a recent podcast? Well, it all went horribly wrong for them, didn't it?
It's I mean, it might as well have been Shamrock Rovers, really, for Brann. They're absolute disgrace getting knocked out by an Irish side. They lost the second leg 2-1. First leg was a 2-2 draw, and they actually went ahead with half an hour to go in the second leg in Ireland, but they couldn't get the business done. Just like the last time they were in Europe, they just flopped miserably. So really poor that, they were 1-3 favourites to win the home leg, and they lost and they drew that. So disappointing from Brann's point of view. I mean, they won against Stabæk just a few days later in the league, which kind of maybe softens the blow a little bit. But you work hard all year, and they finished third in the league. A nice little European adventure a year later, and they're out of the first hurdle. Must be absolutely gutting as Brann fans, really, to go so early as that. But I call it a disgrace, really.
Well, from Shamrock Rovers to just a sham, really, for Brann.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Sarpsborg. Although they've not been in Europe, they did quite well last season, weren't they? And they were a bit of a blueprint for other sides to sort of maybe look at and replicate their model. But before we talk about them, because I know you want to talk about some of their transfers. Let's continue on the European front with Rosenborg and Molde, because they're the two who maybe can carry the can for Norwegian teams. How are they looking, Steve?
Well, Molde drew 0-0 at home on the Thursday night, and I forget the exact name of this team. I'm actually looking it up now, but it was a funny old game because they absolutely murdered them in the first half, did Molde. It was a team from Serbia called Kukarici, and it looked at half time like the second half they'd kick on and win probably 1 or 2-0. The Serbians offered absolutely wank all. And but then after the break, they were actually lucky not to concede an away goal. I thought it was an even game of football, really. So, I mean, the positive thing is they kept the clean sheet. A 0-0 draw is not actually a bad result at home in Europe, is it, really? And from what I saw in the first half, if they actually play properly and convert their chances, then they should be able to get enough. But it's got to be concerning that, you don't win at home as a 1-3 favourite. And, I've also noticed a pattern with Molde that there's too many games this year that have been dominant in phases and just not converted their dominance. And it's starting to catch up with them a little bit. There's too many missed chances or wrong decisions in the final third. And, they may well get away with it, but they don't want to be getting knocked out by a team called Kukarici, for crying out loud, do they? That'd be pathetic. But, 0-0 is not the end of the earth, is it?
No, but it would certainly leave them, going a bit cloud cuckoo land if they weren't to get into that next stage. Molde just maybe wobbling slightly of late. What about the big boys, Rosenborg?
Yeah, I mean, the Champions League tie against Bate Borisov, they lost it 2-1 the first leg away from home. Pretty unlucky, actually, by all accounts, to lose that game. They were probably the better team in the game. And 2-1 away from home is you'd sign up for that, wouldn't you, most days? They got an away goal, a 1-0 victory would see them through to the next round. From what I saw in that first leg, I think they probably have enough against Bate Borisov, but just a question, don't want to concede a stupid goal, keep that clean sheet intact, which always would give them a strong edge, but it's a sort of match. Would it be a shock if it went to extra time 2-1? not really, would it? But it's really interesting to see what the potential matchup would be in the next round, actually, and it could be a Norway against Sweden clash, because AIK are in that other bracket against Maribor, John.
Yeah, well, it all kicked off in this game, AIK. Their European run really has been exemplified by Daniel Sundgren, who I mentioned earlier in the show in the first half of the pod. It all kicked off because he had an arranged transfer to Aris in Greece. And part of it was that he didn't want to appear in Europe because he didn't want to be cup-tied. And it ended up with AIK effectively rescinding his contract in advance, like a week or so in advance, which, all fell apart really. It was very strange and a bit of a sad end for Sundgren, who put out a big statement about everything, saying that his integrity remains. And, he was obviously very hurt by it. And he said it had mentally affected him, the whole furore. I think that's distracted the club a little bit, but they've managed to sort of, set themselves up fairly nicely. We could be looking at AIK reasonable, which would be very interesting, considering we had a big discussion about the Royal League in the last podcast, and the Scandinavian League potential, which you can still listen to. Obviously, dig into iTunes and or Spotify and have a little listen to that episode and that discussion. But yeah, it's AIK did okay. Both games were 2-1, weren't they, Steve? So we'll see kind of what happens. But yeah, just on that one as well. If they do go through, they Haugesund. Sorry, we mentioned that earlier. If Haugesund were to go through, they would actually play one of Bâle or where is it now? PSV, which would be massive for Haugesund.
Oh wow, well, that would be.
So they've got everything to play for there, really. But yeah, and also in Molde, just to sort of touch on that one, if they were to go through, they would play. They would have a game against Aris, which would obviously be potentially Daniel Sundgren's European debut for the club, or AEL Limassol from Cyprus. So winnable to play for in those games.
Yeah, very winnable tie, that one for Molde, I must say, if they did get through. It's a nice draw they've got, and obviously a massive pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for Haugesund there against probably PSV Eindhoven. PSV Bar. That was 3-2 first leg, wasn't it? That's the Champions League qualifier, isn't it? Of course the losers would go into the Europa League draw, wouldn't they? So probably Bâle would be perhaps the favourites there, but big nice reward for them, whatever. So any other results that we need to talk about here?
We mentioned Domzali drew 2-2 with Malmö, so that one's wide open. Obviously, going back into the second leg, Malmö players in the recent games, so they're obviously looking to be fit for that, which has kind of backfired in the league to a certain extent, but has set them up maybe quite nicely for Europe. And I think also Häcken is one we want to talk about, don't we, Steve? They played AZ Alkmaar and they managed to get a 0-0 draw, which was, for me, a really, really good result for Häcken. I mean, if anyone remembers last season, they were 4-0 down in the first leg in their game against the Red Bull side, but this year they've come back and done okay, and they've got a very creditable draw. Clean sheet, no away goal for them, unfortunately, but they can go back to Gothenburg with confidence, really. And AZ didn't really show too much, I'll be honest.
Big shock, isn't it? I mean, AZ were at home in that game. I mean,
I know.
That's. I don't know what the odds were there. I'm guessing they were a pretty short price to win, but that's a hell of a result for Häcken. I mean, whether or not they can convert it, I don't know, but that would be along the lines of sort of Ostersunds the other year when they knocked out Galatasaray, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I actually fancy them, to be honest. I mean, AZ Alkmaar, I know the Dutch league is had problems in recent years, and the level has slightly dipped, I think, below the big sort of three teams. I didn't see much from AZ Alkmaar in a 0-0 draw. They created a few chances, but Häcken, were good value, I think, and I think they can go in, like I said, with real confidence. The winners of that game would play Mariupol from Ukraine. So, if they can get through AZ, they'd fancy themselves maybe.
It would.
Well, Ukraine is obviously a completely different prospect, but they're not out of that one whatsoever. So good result, really. And
just one other thing I want to talk about. We were on about the Royal League the other in the last podcast. If and it is a big if, HJK Helsinki can get past the Red Star Belgrade. Unfortunately, did lose the first leg 2-0, although that was away from home. Then they would be facing FC Copenhagen who I don't think they're going to be troubled by the Welsh outfit. The New Saints, is it? They won 2-0 away from home. I don't think the Welsh side even had a shot on goal. So I think we can presume that FC Copenhagen are through. It'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to see FCK against HJK and then also the Norway against Sweden clash.
Yeah, funnily enough, I've got some friends going to that game. They decided to take a random game, and they asked me what stadium they should go to, and I actually advised them to go Norway or Sweden, but they ended up going to choose Denmark. So shows how much they listen to me. But they'll be at that game. So good luck, and I hope it's a good game there. And 2 more teams to just very quickly. I mean, I know we mentioned AIK, but I didn't quite complete what I was saying there. They lost 2-1 to Maribor, but obviously got an away goal. So they can go back to Stockholm with some confidence. Maybe Henrik Goitom got an equaliser, but they lost 2-1. And I think the other one to talk about, obviously, is Norrköping, who in the Europa League qualifiers beat Liepāja from, I think, Lithuania or Latvia. Latvian. And they will probably feel like they can go away and complete the job there. And in that game, Jordan Larsson was dropped quite dramatically before the match because the transfer had just been agreed to CSKA Moscow. So they managed to win that game without him, with Haksabanovic on the score sheet as well. So that's the wrap for Europe. Before we finish this podcast, Steve, I want to ask you about some Norway transfers. Because there's not been any football, has there? You seem to be on a constant break in the Norwegian league. Do you ever play football?
They've been, on and off the field like anything, haven't they? This year, it's been pretty crazy. I mean, there were a couple of games, just 2 matches a weekend or so ago, where 2-1 wins for Brann and Molde. But a lot of teams have been having to stop, start. But as of this weekend, there's going to be the only couple of breaks before the end of the season will be the international window, September and October.
Seem to be on and off the field more often than New Zealand batsmen at Lords there, Steve.
more often than what will be Australian batsmen in the next 6 weeks, John.
But what is going on in Norway at the moment? I mean, I know where transfer season's open. We talked a little bit about transfer season in Sweden, and I know you've got your blog coming up, which I'm very much looking forward to for Y-Scout. Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 names that we should keep an eye on in this market? Is anyone maybe going to be looking to move to bigger leagues?
Well, the blog will contain some players that have already left the league. A couple of players that I suppose I'm going to have to talk about because I'm not going to be able to talk about them again. And that is Chidera Juka from Vålerenga. He's gone to Heerenveen for nearly €2 million. I think he's going to be an absolutely tremendous signing there for the Dutch team. He can go all the way to the top, Chidera Juka. Real shame to see him leave the league. He's one of my favourite players. And that could look an absolute bargain price, really. To be brutally honest, I think Vålerenga could have done with getting about double that money for him. So he's one player that's gone. And also Tobias Burkheit has gone from Stabæk to Brøndby, the Danish side, for over €1 million. I mean, in terms of, it's not been a lot happening, though, really, in this window so far, which is to be expected. There's still a couple of weeks left, and mostly it happens on deadline day, just like it does over here in the UK. But Sarpsborg have been pretty active, actually. They're the team that are really, and you can see why, because they're obviously in the bottom 3 right now and going much worse than they expected. But they've sold their goalkeeper, Alexander Vasyutin, to Zenit St. Petersburg. Now, here's the laugh for you. They actually signed him from Zenit St. Petersburg for a free about a year and a half ago. So they paid €700,000 on him just in that space of time. I mean, I don't know what on earth Zenit are thinking. They suddenly want him back now. But so he's gone, and replacing him is a guy from the French league, Alexandre Letellier from Angers, a player I'm very familiar with, actually. What I would call a good backup keeper in French football. He should be a very able starter for Sarpsborg in the Eliteserien. So they do have a bit of a French connection, actually, to Sarpsborg. It was a time when they signed ex-Nice player Alexis Bassetti, if you remember that one, John. But they've also gone in for Lenny Nangis, ex-Caen.
Oh, yeah, I remember him at Caen.
Yeah, do you remember Nongis? I mean, that is quite a big signing, you know. I mean, remember him back in the day. He's the player that cost millions of pounds for Lille. And, you know, he's achieved his potential. But, you know, he could potentially be lethal in the Eliteserien, could Nongis. So he looks a very good signing for Sarpsborg.
I'll be honest, I never really quite fancied him, you know, that big money move. I always thought he was a little bit raw at Cannes. He didn't quite, you know, it reminded me of Mbaye Niang as well. They came through together, didn't they? And I always thought he was just a little bit short of maybe a real quality player. But I think in Norway that would be really fascinating. Actually, I'm interested to see how he does there. That's a good signing. I think that's a
very good signing. I mean, Sarpsborg have been active both in and out. I know a player that you quite liked the other week, Sheldon Batio. He's moved on to Belgian side Mechelen. I don't really know. There's no. I mean, on transfer mark, the fee is a question mark. So I don't know if it was a free transfer or they got money for him. But
not even transfer mark knows.
Not right now. So I guess we'll find out, won't we? But undisclosed, I suppose, is the best thing.
Well, that's some signing, isn't it? And for Hiru being potentially, from what you've said there, really, that's high praise from you, Steve, isn't it? I remember you being very positive about Adik Benro in that similar way. So
he's
to keep an eye on him in the Dutch league. Before we go, I've got a couple of players I wanted to ask you about. One of them is Hakon Evjen at Bodø Glimt, because there's been some rumours, and you know, he's one of those players. Bodø Glimt have had a fantastic season, really, haven't they? Doing so well in the league. What's his situation? I know he's scored roughly 4 or 5 goals this season in the league. 4 goals for Bodø.
There's rumours.
Talented young player who's in Norway's under-20 World Cup squad. So what's his outlook?
Well, yeah, I mean, Bodø Glimt are obviously paying for their success now because there's a lot of rumours with players leaving. You know, Lajuni, Björkian at the back. I think even the goalkeeper Ricardo Friedrich was linked with a bigger club recently as well. So, I mean, Hakon Evjen is obviously probably one of the most sought after young talents in the Eliteserien right now. He's shown a very spectacular side to his game, but he's a good all-round winger, really. Fantastic at tracking back, very pacey player, very physically and very intelligent as well in terms of positioning. So, you know, I can see why he's a talent that's sought after. It's just a shame for Bodø Glimt, because if this was a player, for example, at Leeds United, where with Jack Clark's situation, where we sold him to Spurs, but we got him loaned him back for the rest of this season, which is kind of useful because, you know, he can do a job for you. It'd be great for Bodø Glimt if they could sell him and then loan him back for the rest of the season and, you know, maybe finish second in the league or something. But if any decent, reputable club isn't going to want to loan him back in Norway, are they? So I think I have no idea where he might end up. You look at some of these Swedish transfers where you know, Belgium often come knocking, don't they, for Scandinavian players? Maybe that's an area he could end up going. But look, I think it'd be a bit of a surprise if they kept him now, to be honest.
Is there any team in particularly, you know, favourite to sign him?
No, not really. I mean, could be anywhere, mate. I mean, Belgium, I think, if I had to stick my neck on the line right now. But, you know, it'd be nice to see him stay in the league, at least if it was a loan transfer. But there's not enough. I'll be honest with you, the cupboard's a little bit bare these days in Norway. You get the odd exceptional talent like Brant Haaland and that, but it's not as... the shelves aren't as stacked as much as they were, say, 5 years ago. So when someone decent does come along, they stick out like a sore thumb, don't they? And Evjen is one of those examples. So that's why I think these players tend to move on quicker than normal. We talked about this earlier in Sweden. It's because there's not as many of them coming through, and when they do come, they're out of there like like a shotgun.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting to get your thoughts on that, Stephen. Yeah, I haven't seen too many, you know, in terms of rumour, I haven't seen too many clubs strongly linked with him. So, you know, maybe they might be able to keep hold of him in the end, but he's certainly going to be one that will be watched. I want to ask you about another player now, and that is Alex Dyer, who has been a completed transfer. He seems to sort of dart from Sweden to Norway faster than sort of imported goods between the two countries, doesn't he? So yeah, he's back.
Maybe he's got a couple of wives. I don't know, but I mean, lives up to his name a bit, really. I'm afraid, from what I saw of him in Lillestrøm, dire by name, dire by nature. Look, he never caught the eye doing anything much. He was given enough starts at the early part of the season, and the manager just preferred other players. In the end, he was kind of phased out at Lillestrøm, just simply because he wasn't doing enough good things, really. He just looked a bang average, sort of below average, mediocre player, really. And, he didn't stick out in my mind as being anything much. So I don't really see it being a gain for Elfsborg, I don't think, really.
Well, he's been at the club before, so they'll know all about him. Just didn't seem to work out for him in Norway, has it really? I mean, he's an English player. He joined the league many years ago, 29 now, so he's been around. Well, I think his nationality is Montserrat, but I think he came from mainly English leagues. Just not quite worked out from there, or what's been wrong? Because he was at Östersunds as well, having moved from Welling United, a non-league back in the day. And he seems to have forged a career for himself in Scandinavia with 5 years in the league, in the 2 leagues. But Lillestrøm just never really quite worked, did it?
I think the problem is you can talk the talk, can't you? But at some point you've got to walk the walk. And to be brutally honest, I think he's fairly crap. Maybe he's not as good as he thinks he is, or maybe he's just a sort of player who can't settle down. Maybe he needs to just go down a little bit, another level where he can actually be more of a Betty Big Bollocks, really. He can't seem to settle very well. I'm not saying he must obviously have ability. He's done in the past, but sometimes you can get ahead of yourselves, can't you? So, I wish him well. But look, that Lillestrøm side is not the greatest team in the world, John. And if you can't get yourself as a regular starter in that lineup, then I think you've got problems.
Well, he got 2 goals, 2 assists in 17 games, 13 starts for Elfsborg in his previous Allsvenskan, sojourn. This season for Lillestrøm, 8 started, 11 played, no goals, no assists, 2 big chances created, but really, as you said there, it doesn't seem to have quite worked for him in Norway. So we'll see how he does at Elfsborg, who, by the way, are really, really struggling under Jimmy Tellin, which I did say could potentially happen, and a lot of fans are unhappy about the club at the moment and some poor results. But yeah, I think we're going to leave it there, aren't we, Steve? Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we move on?
No. Oh, I did want to mention Fantasy Eliteserien. I'm going to do a video this week for all you fantasy fans out there waiting for my opinion recently. It's been a while, so I do promise a video this week.
There you go. It's on record now. He's promised a video. He's promised a blog. So it's going to be Meat Man Soccer Week this week, which I'm very excited about. We'll be back for another show soon because we have an exclusive interview coming for you, which we'll be excited to bring you. So stay tuned, and don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod, and also like us on Facebook, Nordic Football Podcast. You can also subscribe and join us on Patreon for some exclusive content. Patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to help us with the price of maybe buy us a pint every week, or buy a meat pie for Meat Man Soccer with your contribution. And yeah, we'll be back for another show quite soon, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of big games, as we said, in Europe. Big tasks for some teams ahead to really try and get through to those group stages, the lucrative group stages, and we'll be backing them all the way and following it. So hope to be back soon for another episode. Steve, thanks very much for joining us. We will see you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Take care.